All right, let's look at slope between 2 points. So the slope is the steepness of a line, and we can calculate it using algebra. Okay, we need to look at the x and the y from the first point, and then the x and the y from the second point. And we're going to plug these values into our equation for slope. Okay, so we go in and look at where did we get to for y, which is -8, and then it's minus where did we start? -3, okay? And then we do the same thing for x. Where did we get to for x, which is 1, minus where did we start, which is -2. And then we've got -8 minus 3 on the numerator, so that's -11. And 1 minus a -2 would be 1 plus 2. So our slope here is -11 thirds. Now we can use slope and the y-intercept to graph lines. So slope is the steepness, and that is the change in y divided by the change in x, and the change in y we call the rise, and the change in x we call the run. And then the y-intercept is a point that we can start with. And when you're looking at an equation y equals mx plus b, the number, the constant there, that is the y value of the y-intercept. Okay, and then the coefficient of x, that is the slope. So looking at this first one, I'm going to first go ahead and graph that y value of the y-intercept. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then I can use the slope. If the slope here is -2/3, I just give my negative to the 2, and then that means I go down 2, and then I always go from left to right for the denominator. So I go down because it's negative, and I always go right, whatever the value is in the denominator. Okay, so I go down 2, and then I always go right, whatever that is, so right 3. And there's our first equation. And now I can do the I can do the same thing here on number 4, but first I'm going to rewrite that in y equals mx plus b form. So I'm going to solve for x, and I would subtract 3x from both sides and get -2y is equal to -3x plus 6. And then I can divide everything by -2, and I get y is equal to 3/2 x minus 3. And now I can plot that. Here's my y value of my y-intercept for that second line. And then since it's a +3, the slope there is 3/2, so I go up 3, and then I'm always going to go right, whatever that value is in the denominator. Okay, so from my y-intercept I go up 1, 2, 3, and then over 2. Up 1, 2, 3, over 2. And there's my next line. There we go. And these are perpendicular lines. And I could have told that just from looking at the slopes. My slopes were -2/3 and 3/2. And notice how the numbers are reciprocals, and then I have a negative and a positive. So that is an indication that we have perpendicular lines. Okay, so we look for opposite signs and reciprocal numbers, and that shows perpendicular lines. Okay, let's look at this next one. I have x equals -10. I'm going to divide by, or 5x equals -10. Dividing by 5 gives x equals -2. And this is kind of a special case. X is always -2. Okay, it doesn't matter what y is. X is always -2. So here's my x. Oops. X is -2 for any y value you want to put in there. So that is a vertical line. And the slope for a vertical line is undefined. And what happens if you were trying to actually calculate out that slope? If we had 2 lines, 2 points on our line, 2 minus a -3 for y, and then -2 minus a -2, what you end up getting here, you would have 5 over -2 plus 2. You would have 5 divided by 0, which is undefined. So the slope on a vertical line is undefined. Okay, let's look at another example where y equals 2. If I was making an xy chart for this, y is always 2. It doesn't matter what x values you put in there, y is 2. Okay, so there we go. And if we're looking at some points, maybe I'll take this one, -2, 2, and this one, 1, 2, 3. The slope here, we would take the change in y's divided by the change in x's, and we would get 0 divided by 5, which is 0. So for a horizontal line, the slope is 0. Okay, great. So perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocals. Those are perpendicular lines. A vertical line, the slope is undefined, and for a horizontal line, the slope is 0. Now let's look if I had a new line, say y equals -4. For this new line, I'll do that in a different color. This new line, the slope is also 0. And you see how they're parallel, okay? In order to have lines going in the same direction, their steepness needs to be exactly the same. So if I wanted another line that was parallel here, I need to have the same slope, same steepness. So parallel lines have the same slope. There we go. All right, so there's our slope of perpendicular, parallel, vertical, and horizontal lines. Okay, the slope of the line is given, and we need to figure out the slope of a line parallel and a perpendicular to the given line. Okay, in this case, our slope is given as -3/8. A parallel line has the exact same slope. Okay, parallel lines have the same slope, and then perpendicular, they are reciprocal numbers and they're opposite signs. Okay, parallel, same slope, perpendicular is opposite signs and reciprocal numbers. Okay, so for parallel, this is my horizontal line with a slope of 0. Perpendicular is undefined. And the way I remember that is, I think if my kid is walking along on a flat line, his danger there is 0, but if they're climbing on a cliff, it's undefined how terrified I am for their safety. So that's the slope of a vertical line, and those are perpendicular.